Now starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Maria Vanderkolk. I'm the Director of Professional Development for the National Association of Government Communicators, and welcome to our monthly webinar series. I believe that all of our attendees today are members of NAGC. Normally, I spend a little time in the introduction kind of telling you about our organization and the benefits of joining, but I think we're all members. And just so you know, this webinar will be available to NAGC members on our website once it is concluded. So we're just going to jump right into the presentation. Our webinar is on social media security. Our speaker is Anastasia Wisniewski, and I will introduce her in a moment. I did want to tell you that if you have questions in the, as we're going through the presentation, that Anastasia welcomes the questions. I think she prefers a more interactive presentation. And so if you have questions that seem, timely, please get them in, and I will interrupt her as need be to have her answer your questions as we go along. So let me now introduce Anastasia. Anastasia Wisniewski is the Coast Guard's Digital Media Officer. She has a Master of Communications in Digital Media and a Master of Communications in Networks from the University of Washington. Lieutenant Wisniewski has more than 10 years of experience in public affairs in the Coast Guard, including working as a public information officer during most of the last decade's large U.S. disasters. Engaged in social media since the 1990s, as a public affairs officer, she initiated and then helped build the Coast Guard social media program and was the first official blogger of the service. So let me now turn it over to Lieutenant Anastasia Wisniewski.
So, hi everybody. So when one of my friends read the part about the 90s, he started laughing, saying I wasn't that much older than he was, but I pointed out that I really started doing blogging and a lot of the social media stuff when I was about 15. So I'm what they I'm what they call a digital native. So I'm also one of the age groups most likely to get your company in trouble. So what we're going to talk about today is obviously social media security. So first thing we're going to go over is types of social media. At this point, this is probably old hat, but it's the blogs. Microblogs are things like Twitter and Plurk. Networking sites, which would be something like Facebook, LinkedIn, Ello. And then imagery is like Instagram, Vine, Pinterest. And then we have our message board or wiki type things, including Reddit, 4chan, and a couple other places that I kind of consider the Wild West of the internet. In most agencies, employees aren't restricted to the kind of personal social media they use. Some agencies do have policies on what people can say, but they don't necessarily have restrictions on what social media they use. But along with that, employees are often not getting the training they need to be safe on social media. For example, in the Coast Guard, we give training and we talk about how to do Coast Guard official social media, but we only recently have really started digging into how our service members need to be using social media to be safe and to be professional and things like that. For example, just last week I gave a similar presentation to this to the Coast Guard flag level spouses, so the spouses of the admirals and the SCSs. I'm just talking about the fact that even though they aren't in the service themselves, that due to social media, the lines between our personal lives and our professional lives are blurring. So, as you can see, the stats are increasing. Like Facebook actually has not seen as much of a growth in the last couple of years as it had before. Some of the other sites are seeing a little bit more growth on how many people are using them. Often a lot of people, the answer is just tell your employees they can't use social media. That suggestion came up recently, especially like in a disaster. So when you have something like a Deepwater Horizon or something like that, I often hear the suggestion of, well, just don't let them use social media. Tell them they can't use it when they're on a response. It's not entirely realistic, and you could actually cause more concern. If I went off of social media without letting my family and friends know that I was planning to do it, they'd wonder if I was dead because I'm so tied in. I got a cold once and didn't post for 24 hours, and my mom called me freaking out that something had happened to me. The other thing is that in some cases, telling your employees they cannot use social media might not actually stand up in court. It might not be legal. The thing is you can teach them what they can and can't disclose. And the other thing is that it's better the employee you know is talking about themselves or your agency than letting someone random do it. For example, during Deepwater Horizon, we had people claiming they were official accounts and putting out information, but they weren't. Or we had people claiming to be employees. The IRS, I think, is going through something right now where someone saying they were an employee on Reddit has turned off their account, and so they're facing questions on if the IRS told them that they couldn't have the account. So, you know, it's better to have your employees educated than to try and tell them no. And I think that's the way my mom dealt with us as teenagers. She figured it was better to educate us, because if she told us no, the first thing we were going to do is what she said no to. So there's a lot of lack of direction because a lot of this social media stuff is pretty new, and it's constantly changing. ELO, for example, ELLO, when there were some security concerns and some privacy concerns with Facebook not too long ago, a group of people got together and they started what they called ELO. And it is a streamlined version of a similar system to Facebook. And everyone said it was going to be the next thing. Well, as you all know, until you get to the tipping point of number of people, it isn't the next big thing. It's going to take a while for something to take over for Facebook, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be some new tool. Good examples. Recently, Snapchat came out in the last few years, as well as Vine, and Instagram introduced video. So it's always growing, it's always changing. So when you're thinking about the social media things for your agency, what you need to think about is you really need to think about who has social media accounts. So of course you're going to have your work accounts. You know, we have the official Coast Guard account, and our units and districts have Facebook accounts, and we have an official Twitter account. And where is the line between personal and professional accounts? You know, some of you might know retired Commander Chris O'Neill, and he always did an excellent job. His Twitter handle, sorry Chris if you're on the phone, I'm totally throwing you under the bus on this, but his Twitter handle is Coasty Chris, and his photograph is a picture of him, well, it used to be a picture of himself in uniform. For that reason, that wasn't really a personal account anymore. Now, it wasn't an official Coast Guard account, but because he was representing himself both in his login name and in the physical picture as Coast Guard, he had to walk a different line than other Coast Guard members I know of that have a personal account with a personal name, don't mention what they do for a living. At the same time, that still doesn't mean that, let me give a quick example. We have a case going on right now. There was a Coast Guard member who posted inappropriate videos on Vine. And many of them she's wearing civilian clothes, and some she's wearing a uniform. And we're trying to figure out right now what precedent there is to hold her accountable for the fact that some of these videos have incredibly inappropriate sentiments and incredibly, they're just not appropriate for someone in the Coast Guard to be saying. So where's the line though? Because she didn't use her she didn't use her Coast Guard name, and until recently she wasn't using the words Coast Guard or the uniform. So especially when you're looking at digital natives or your younger employees, and I would basically say that's anyone under 30 at this point, heck, anyone 35 and younger at this point, more than likely, but especially your younger people coming in that are 18, 19, 20, people who are coming to work for the government don't necessarily understand that when you take on certain jobs and responsibility, what the First Amendment actually is and how the First Amendment actually applies to you. Especially for the military agencies, we uphold the Constitution, defend the First Amendment, but when we take that oath, we do lose some of our freedom of speech. We accept that, and so that means when there was a Marine who was posting about how Obama needed to be impeached and how he wouldn't follow his orders and he went on a bit of a bender, he was in a lot of trouble. He lost his job. He was court-martialed. Basically for that sentiment. So
So,
where are those lines?
Anastasia,
Mhm.
this is Maria. I just thought
Yep.
and maybe you'll get into more detail on this, but um, if, for example, the young lady that you're referring to,
Mhm.
makes sense to me that when she was in uniform on her personal account, that would be one thing. But if she's not in uniform, not on the clock,
Mhm.
what are her rights
And that's
to
where
really say?
it gets a little shady. Now, for example, we had someone off of his personal Facebook account. Again, so had she not been in uniform and not been on the bridge of a ship for one of these, we probably never would have had it brought to our attention because there would have not necessarily been anything to indicate to us that she's Coast Guard. Now, if it's someone like me, my name, I'm the only one in the country. And if you Google me, Coast Guard comes up. So I am always careful with my social media because my name is associated with the Coast Guard. So there's these weird gray lines. But had she not been in uniform, we probably wouldn't have seen it. Now, on the flip side of that, we had a Coast Guard member post in response to a photo we had put up on USCG's Facebook account with some incredibly inappropriate genderized comments. And it was his account, and he had a picture of himself. You could tell he was a coastie, but he did it on his own time. He did it on his personal account, but he was still investigated. The investigation on that is pending. I'm not sure where it's at. So unfortunately, right now, it's a little bit of the Wild West. There aren't a lot of established rules, but the way that the Coast Guard has been educating our people is to consider anything you put out on social media as a public release of information. So, for example, when we had a crash in Mobile, Alabama, where we lost some coasties, some people went to the sites, the personal Facebook page of Lieutenant Commander Dan Taylor, and started writing about how much they were going to miss him and the JG who passed away. And this was before all the family members had been notified. So those members that did that violated the next of kin notification. So there we had the opportunity to sit with them and go, okay, don't do this. And different units handled it different ways. But really, the military falls into a slightly different category than some of the other government agencies because of the UCMJ. There are certain things within the UCMJ that we can hold people to, conduct unbecoming, things like that. So what I talk about on this slide too is what are the repercussions if the employee damages the agency with a post. Um, there are a number of agencies that have gone through an employee running their mouth or saying something inappropriate, or posting ridiculous things on Twitter and then claiming that someone else had taken their Twitter account. So when you're looking at doing social media with your agency, you need to develop your policy. You need to decide what you will hold your employee accountable for. And that could be similar to some agencies where they talk about that you should not go into social media sites and identify yourself. For example, don't identify yourself as an IRS agent and then give advice. There are certain policies in place for some agencies that say don't go out and talk and say, oh, I do this and here's my advice on this issue. So figure out that fine line between trying to control your employee's personal life and protecting the reputation of your agency.
So, Anastasia, have you found, because I don't have the military group at my place of business, I work for
Mm-hmm.
municipal government, but what we do have are the police officers, our
Mm-hmm.
police department. And what I have found is, of course, a lot of our police officers are in an older generation and maybe not that interested in social media. But what I find is, percentage-wise, there's very few of them who have Facebooks for this very reason.
Mm-hmm.
And have you done any research on, for example, military personnel, what the percentage of involvement in, for example, Facebook is as compared to the rest of the population, or is, with all of the younger generation coming in, is it pretty much universal?
Well, the Coast Guard doesn't have any official research done. I know there is some research ongoing at a couple of the grad schools looking into that, but generally from having given training to units and things like that, it's usually the younger employees, the younger generations that are engaging in this sort of thing. And they're the kids that grew up having their parents videotape their first step and videotape their whole lives, so they don't understand the difference. Whereas older generations seem to really delineate very carefully between personal and public. And so you do see a generation gap there that is pretty in line with what you're seeing on the outside. Now, mind you, both of my parents are on Facebook and Twitter, which scares me a little, but there are some generational gaps that we do even see. I can tell you that the last few incidents we've had with people posting inappropriate things on social media, almost all of them were under the age of 25. So yeah, make sure you develop your policy and then develop training. Sit with your people, and we'll get a little bit more into this in a bit, but talk to them. Tell them what the chances are, and that they are representing a government agency, even if they are posting something on their Facebook page. And that's actually, I do know a lot of police officers that intentionally don't engage on Facebook for that reason, for the reason of having something they said on Facebook be brought up against them if they were in a court case, is what one of my police officer friends told me, is that he's worried he'd have a bad day at work, go home, write something, and then get in trouble for it 3 years down the road. And then implement your training, and then, yeah, watch cat videos, because that's what the internet's really for. So let's talk real quick about beyond just people posting things they shouldn't. Let's talk about the tactics that are used online to trick a user. And this is going to be something that'll happen to any of your people running social media, but it also happens to our employees at home, and they can accidentally give away really important information because they don't know they're doing it. One of them is called baiting, and it's similar to what BuzzFeed does, the top 10 reasons you should, eat cheese. Okay, what are the top 10 reasons? And what these will be is there'll be an email or a link on a web page that's intentionally trying to get you to click on something. Well, sometimes it's baiting you into things that you don't necessarily want to download or you don't want to be. So be careful when you're clicking on something that seems like it's intentionally trying to get you to buy or download something. Another thing is called clickjacking, and this is where a link is actually masking a malware link. Now, Facebook and some of them are pretty good at masking that, but I almost asked how many of you and then realized I can't see you raise your hands, but I'm sure a lot of you, if you're on Twitter, have seen where all of a sudden one of your friends sends you a direct message telling you that they found a picture of you online. Well, that's clickbaiting. They didn't find a picture of you. They've been hacked, and that account is now sending you malware to try and hack you. This is more you get a message from what looks like your bank saying, I need you to click on this because your account has been compromised. When you click on that link, it might look like a Bank of America link or a Wells Fargo link, but it's actually not linking you to www.usaa.com. It's linking you someplace else. Then there is, I'm going to skip doxing for a second, but we'll go to cross-scripting. Cross-scripting, so when you look at your banking site or Amazon or a shopping site, you're going to see up in the left-hand corner that little lock, and it'll say HTTPS. And you have to be really careful to look for those things, because sometimes when someone does cross-scripting, if you don't look up and check for the things that authenticate the site, that's why a lot of banks now have that funny little picture. So when you click through and you put in your password, then it's going to show you a picture, like I think mine's a hamster, and it asks you for another key phrase. What that's doing is it's letting you know that it's a trusted site. If you know you're supposed to get a picture of a puppy and that picture doesn't show up, you are more than likely on a site that has been made to look like your trusted site but actually isn't. And then there's doxing. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Gamergate or what ISIS recently did. Doxing is where someone grabs all of your personal information and they publish it on the internet for malicious intent. ISIS recently did this. They published a list of federal employees' addresses and things like that. If you look it up, you can find that they've done it a couple times now. But the the other example of it is Gamergate. Gamergate is a campaign where basically a number of anonymous people online went and published the information of a group of women who work in the video game and board game and game design industry for the intention of having pizza sent to their house. The scariest thing is someone will do what's called swatting. And swatting is where they call the police and they basically get the police to send a SWAT team to your house because they claim there's a hostage situation, there's a bomb, or there's something. SWAT team shows up to your house. As you can imagine, that's probably pretty scary. It can also lead to injury and other things. So you have to be really careful with the whole doxing thing. On that note, when you're doing your training with your people, talking to them about this can really panic them. I always advise pretty much everyone Google searches themselves once a month, just to see what's out there. And I'll get into a personal story on why that's important in just a second. So not everyone is who they say they are. So if you look, 40% of Fortune 100 companies online are actually unauthorized accounts. They're not the official accounts. Now they might look fully official, but they're unauthorized. So you really need to look. Maybe say you like a certain pair of jeans, go to that company's webpage and link from them back to Facebook to find their real Facebook page to follow them. Be really careful because a lot of times they're not who they say they are. Similar thing on Twitter. 20% of Twitter accounts are unauthorized. Twitter has a little bit more of a validation thing going. The little blue checks you see, that's going to let you know if it's an authorized account or not. But as you can see, these accounts are going to look fairly real. So you might think you're talking to, one of these companies like Nintendo or whatever, when in reality you might not be. A friend of mine, she actually, she does video blogging and she's been on a few TV shows and things. She had someone change one of the L's in her name to a capitalized I and did an unauthorized fake account, and it took her months to get it taken down, and the account was pretty awful. So that's not all. Let's talk about this. Check your security. Less than 15% of people check their social media security regularly. That means going to Twitter, figuring out what the latest, security measures are. Like they introduce blocking, they introduce reporting. You can now report harassment in a different way. But also going to Facebook, as I'm sure you've all noticed, Facebook updates things constantly and changes things constantly. So you want to go and you want to make sure that everything is up to date. For example, you can now go back and change all of your past history blog or Facebook posts to being friends only or a very specific group only. And that's awesome because if you're an employee that was a bartender in college and now you're working for, CBP or the FBI or somebody, you might not necessarily want certain things public anymore. So you can you lock them down so that they can't be found. You lock them down and you have to be careful to check that security because when they change things, if you don't know it's changed, you might not have noticed that you needed to update something. How often are you checking into the Starbucks near your house? This is when you're looking at Foursquare or when you have geolocation enabled on your phone and you post to Facebook, something, and it tells people exactly where you are. Disable your locations, and I know that checking in on Yelp and Foursquare can get you discounts, but it also gives away your location. So if you constantly go to the Starbucks that's right downstairs from your work or is on your walk home, and you keep checking in on Foursquare or you keep checking in on Yelp, yeah, you're the mayor of that Starbucks now, And anybody who wants to can see that you go there a lot. So anyone who wanted to find you can go to that Starbucks. Tweeting your new tattoo. Not saying that all of you have tattoos, but if you have if you do something like that, like you have an identifier, you make yourself easy to spot in public. And this isn't to say that you can't tweet that new tattoo or the shiny car or whatever. Just be aware that when you're posting images that make you identifiable, if you're walking downtown and someone has seen this account and they know you work for a company that they're mad at or whatever, you have given a visual representation of yourself. And Tinder. So there's a lot of these apps coming out now, but Tinder's the most dominant one. It's an online gamification of dating for phones. And what it does is it takes pictures from your Facebook account and someone who's looking for someone in your age range and stuff, it gives them pictures of you. And if you swipe left, you're not interested in the person. If you swipe right, you are. And if two people are interested in each other, then your accounts link and you're able to chat. Well, my friends were talking about this at a bar one evening, and I decided to check it out. And needing better hobbies, I decided to see how long it would take me to find people's personal information. And I just wanted to see, because they're just pictures, right? And the Tinder account only says your first name. So like Joe or Kate. So it doesn't say your last name, just says your first name, whatever you input to Facebook. 5 out of the 7 accounts I looked at, I could find their personal information in 10 minutes or less. And by personal information, I mean their full name, sometimes where they worked. Using sites like Spokeo, I could find how much they made, their families' names. I could find out if they were married. And how it happens is that you've got your first name. Now, if you're like me and you have a really unique first name, you got to be really careful. But one example is there was a gentleman who had his name, and he mentioned that he was a bartender, and he had a couple pictures. Well, just by looking at one of the pictures, I saw a magazine cover in the background that looked like it was talking about the bar. I put in his first name, the name of that magazine, and his account said he was from Alexandria. I put that in there. I found his first and last name and found a lot of information about him just using his name, a town, and a picture. Another gentleman just had pictures of himself doing a lot of formal events, and you could see like the name of the event on the banner behind him. Well, using his name, the name of that banner and the year it said, I could find out who attended certain events. And this was just me sitting while my friends were looking to see if someone was hot or not, playing with my phone. Now, I'm not someone with malicious intent. I was doing it because I wanted to be able to tell people, okay, be careful. Okay, so those are my dogs. Before I talk about this screen, so let me give a quick personal story on some of this, is that the reason I say always Google search yourself about once a month, maybe every other month, is because right after I joined the Coast Guard, I did a Google search on myself, and I found that an ex-boyfriend had put me up for sale on a Ukrainian bride site. And it had my picture, it had where I went to high school, it had my weight, and he had added 20 pounds. You know, it had all this information. And it was enough to do identity theft. It was enough for someone to find me. And so I tried to contact the company. So I went in and I found the company that owned the site. I found out it was in the Ukraine. And I emailed them and said, I need you to take this down. They responded that they wanted a color photocopy of my passport in order to be able to do that. So I called the U.S. Embassy in the Ukraine, told them that I was a federal employee, that I was a military officer, explained to them what happened, and they helped me through the process. And actually, the site ended up being turned off because it turned out that there was a lot of this sort of thing going on. So that's kind of my live and learn story of please make sure you're checking what information is out there about you, and be careful what you're putting out there. And that's why I have these up here. What's a picture worth again? I'm a fairly public person. I have red hair. As you can see on the left-hand side, I have very distinctive looking cartoon animal dogs. If I posted a picture of myself with my dogs, I actually, when I lived back in Seattle, when I was in Ballard, I had someone walk up to me that I did not know, and they pointed at the gray dog and said, "Is that Z-Bean? I love Z-Bean." Well, my dog has a hashtag, and this person had been following the hashtag. They happened to see me at a coffee shop, and they came up to talk to me. That wasn't necessarily creepy, but you got to be careful when you're putting this stuff out there. So when you're employees, and so when you're in your personal life and you're putting a picture of being on deployment, or say you're on vacation, be mindful of this stuff. So my first name is Anastasia, and I'm a huge Seahawks fan. Anyone who knows me knows I'm ridiculous about it. That's my brother and I, the first time the Seahawks won the NFC West Championship. If you put my name and Seahawks together in a Google search, you will probably find something I wrote or a picture of me. So when I was looking at Tinder, I was very careful not to let a picture of me wearing anything with Seahawks gear was in those pictures. So sit and think for a little bit as you're putting out these pictures of your family on social media, as you're putting out pictures of a girls' night out at a bar. Think very carefully and teach your employees to think very carefully on how much visual information am I giving, and how much concern do I have for people trying to find me or try to steal my identity or try to get to my agency through me. Because I work in public affairs, I'm not necessarily as concerned with people knowing what I look like or that I'm a Seahawks fan. One of my friends, another lieutenant, on the other hand, has zero social media presence because he works in an office where he just doesn't want people to be able to find him. My younger sibling is also fairly hard to find on any social media, mostly because he thinks it's stupid, but also because he works in a field where he's just decided it's in his best interest not to have stuff out there. So each person is going to be making these decisions for themselves. The best thing we can do as an agency is make sure we are educating them on how to make the safest decisions. When someone is posting pictures of your children at Christmas, if their phone has geotagging on, they've just given away the location of your house and what your children look like. So you have to look at these things and think about the geotagging and the location stuff. And that is right here. How much are you telling them? 2010, Adam Savage from Mythbusters posted a picture of his car with the words "off to work." Well, his phone's geolocation, his geotagging was on. So he published this, and the guy's pretty famous. Very shortly, people were showing up at his house or driving by because he had given away the location of his house. Many people don't know how to check how many of their apps are tracking them. As you can see over here on the right-hand side, this is actually a screen capture from my phone. And I'm pretty careful to make sure that if an app needs my location to function, for example, Flickster for finding a movie, or the Coast Guard app that we just released, it actually says when using. So when you're using social media, when you're using Facebook, or when you're using Twitter, is there really any reason why you need to be publishing the location where that photo was taken? Is there a reason why you need to be publishing your location as you tweet about, how your football team is doing, or the fact that you're craving a s'mores frappuccino? Like, you got to really think not just about the message you're giving out, but what are you giving out location-wise? More smart, less scary. So social media, it's awesome. And the thing is we get so ingrained in talking about our security and talking about how scary it can be, and people trying to break, like how in one city they had a rash of thefts because a bunch of people were posting about going on vacation, and someone figured out to watch their social media accounts for when they were going on vacation, and once they were on vacation, they'd break into their house. So there's all these stories about stalkers and all this scary stuff. But when you think about it, it's a great way for our employees, our service members, to show the human side of our agencies, to show, the dad, like all the videos of the parents coming home from deployment are usually posted on social media, on personal social media. It brings us closer to our families, And it gives us a chance to tell our agency's stories in different ways. And it gives our employees and our people the chance to talk about us in a way where they see the people behind the uniform, they see the people behind something, and that can be wonderful. It's also given us a way to see a disaster in real time in a way that we didn't before. The difference between Hurricane Katrina to Hurricane Sandy was intense. How fast tweets were happening. But again, on a security and personal thing, is a lot of the pictures were faked for Sandy. There was a whole rash of people faking pictures. I'm sure a lot of you saw the picture of the big storm cloud going over the Statue of Liberty, and that wasn't real. And then it, social media brightens our days with, tiny hamsters eating burritos. So I always try to explain it whenever I'm giving training to any of the Coast Guard members. It's a lot like a big city. It's like visiting New York. It can be amazing and it can be wonderful, but it's a big city. And not everyone in a big city is great, and not everyone in the big city is there to, shake your hands and be your neighbor. So just plan ahead and be smart about your visit and be smart about what you're doing, and it can work out. And for us, yeah, most agencies are doing a pretty good job of maintaining their security within their buildings, within their social media in their buildings. But studies are finding that our biggest security risk is actually our employees, because we're not turning to them and saying, hey, when you go home, be careful. Be careful, because someone can find your location, or someone can get a hold of you or hack your email account because you clicked on something on Facebook. We don't train our people enough, and so being able to focus on them and teach them how to use social media in a safe way outside of work is just as important as teaching them how to use it at work. And do we have any questions out there?
I do have a couple questions for you. Thank you, Anastasia. That was great. The first one is, can LinkedIn, Facebook, etc. I'm sorry. Can the monikers, or maybe that means their logos, on official websites be hacked to send you to an unauthorized site?
That is largely going to depend on how you're hosting your own site. So in order to hack those pictures, for the most part, they're actually going to have to hack your web page and your data security to get into the code in the background. So find your IT guys and talk to them and find out if they've had any click problems. But usually, no. Most government agencies are secure. But yeah, check with your IT people to make sure that they're looking at those things, because the only way to hack a logo and reroute it would be to hack the source code behind the page, and that can be pretty tough to do.
Okay. Next question, what is Spokeo?
Oh, sorry, Spokeo.
Spokeo.
Yeah, let me type it out for myself so I can remember how to spell it, because I say it a lot. So Spokeo, it's S-P-O-K-E-O.
Yeah.
So Spokeo.com is a people search site. And there's several of these, but Spokeo is one of the most comprehensive. It uses some intense algorithms. And it's a site that basically uses public records to find people. So if you type in your name and you haven't contacted them to say, hey, I'm a federal employee, please take this down, which, by the way, most of these search sites, if you tell them you work for the government, most of them will take them down. When you type in the search, it basically finds your name in any electric public record. So someone can find if you've gotten speeding tickets, they can find the most recent place you lived, they can find your general income, they can find your family member names. So yeah, Spokeo is kind of creepy. And there's a few of these. And mind you, it has had a positive use in that I know in a couple search and rescue cases we were able to use it to help us find the address for somebody. But overall, you don't want your information on those sites. So yeah, Spokeo is, again, S-P-O-K-E-O, and it's a people search site. It's like Google for people.
Another question is, you've mentioned that they'll take information down if you are a government employee. Do you know will they do it if you are not a government employee?
I think on a lot of the sites, if you aren't a government employee, they'll do it, but there's a fee.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. I don't see any.
And actually, real quick, there are services that will go through, and for a fee, they will wipe this stuff clean for you. I can't recommend any of them because I've never done it because I can do it myself, but there are agencies, like there are online companies out there now that help you scrub your internet presence. So if you find things out there that you don't want out there, you might want to look into one of those.
Okay. Well, it looks like that's the end of our questions. Thanks so much, Anastasia. That was fascinating. I'm not a huge personal social media user, but I'm already thinking about things I need to go and change on my Facebook site. So thank you so
No
much.
problem.
And just hopefully we'll see all of the participants in Memphis the first week of June for the Communications School. We don't have another webinar scheduled, but hopefully we'll get one scheduled for July. So thanks again, everybody. Thank you, Anastasia, and
No
everybody
problem.
have a good afternoon.